Still got a few more things for my tray. At least it's a colorful gift. That they do there is beyond me. A bit of magic and witchcraft, I suppose. Look, 300 death-defying steps to reach the front door of the Victorian stone castle, which was comprised of multiple wings, numerous towers, and a sprinkling of turrets. On top of her head she wore a frilly lace nurse's cap, smiled in delight. Long ago see if I can find you some real help. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to take you all the way back to Earth. And that's a trip that would last us 100 days or so just to get there. We're so far out in the galaxy. But I do have my own medicines, and I am somewhat trained, you know, flying about. First thing I want to give you. Do you know what this is? This tiny vial. That's right. It's water from the fountains in the main town of Drusilla. It has incredible healing properties, and it's a potent painkiller. So, if you can just sit up a little bit. There you go. And I'm going to help you. Go ahead and drink that. Good. Just a drop. Just a drop or so will help you. Just a drop. Just a few drops. That's all you need. How are you feeling? Just awful. Well, I have some other things that can help you. I've made you a strong tea. This too will help with recovery, and it'll help you fall into a deep sleep. Sleep is probably the best medicine. Do you remember anything about what happened to you? No? You don't remember a thing? I don't know where anybody's gone. I've come along to trade in my wares with my airship. And like I said, you were the only one I found. I mean, we are way out here on an outpost, but normally there's more than 5,000 people here. It's like everybody's all of a sudden gone. And I have no idea where they went to. I'm gonna just get you to have a sip. Just a sip. There you go. Just a nice relax. Absolutely. Calanthea, and it's their perfume that cures. I'm just going to put it in a bit of cheesecloth for you with some other spices. The fragrances themselves can heal you. Roses myself. I keep them in my glass house on my airship, and then I dry them. Usually their fragrances are enough, but you were so wounded, I had to resort to the waters. Herbs and spices to add to the fragrance poultice to help make you feel better. We spoke up before, do you remember that? Yes, you said you can't remember anything. Either fell or you were struck on the head. I have no idea what happened. But I am sure your memory will return in due time. If it doesn't return soon, I have some other medicines we can try. No inconvenience, none at all. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm sorry I don't know your name or anything about yourself, but I'm sure that I'll come back to you soon. So you probably remember what you asked me last time you woke up. You asked me to read you a story. You requested a specific story. I'm just gonna go ahead and put this on right next to your head. You asked me to read you a very specific story. It's a story from Earth of Old called Harry Potter. Unfortunately, I don't have that story, but I found another book in my library that I've never seen before. In fact, I could have sworn it wasn't here before I came to this planet, before I picked you up even. But it's a similar kind of story. I was reading it to myself, and I think you'll like it. So I already took great care of you, and I've dressed all your wounds, so I won't do that now. I don't need to change them for a while, but I did think I would go ahead and perhaps wash your face a little bit. That might help you to feel better. It might be very soothing. So if you allow me, I'll go ahead and wash your face a little bit. Okay. Some stuff off my tray. Yeah, I actually got a few more things for my tray. So good to you to have your face washed. Again, I wouldn't be too worried about your memory. After all, your long-term memory seems pretty well. You remembered. You may not remember your name, but you remembered a story that you had read. You remembered about Harry Potter. I agree. I read that in an ancient Earth literature class, and it was just such a delight. Let me go ahead. I've got a nice soap here for you. Last thing I wanted to do. There's just one last thing I want to do, and that's because you have a few cuts and scrapes on your face. I was just gonna go ahead and put this little salve on your face. Would that be? I'm just gonna go ahead and put this little salve on your face. It will help heal your wounds faster. only other thing to do is get started on reading. Yeah, like I said, this book just showed up. Are you ready? Drusilla Gobblestone was born under a dark sign. That was why, at age 11, she presented herself to Mrs. Morris's school for wayward girls and other exotic creatures. The school was located on the outskirts of Blessings Hollow on the coast of Maine. She had not moved far, having attended the nearby Trixie's Tri-State Orphan Hostelry on the opposite end of town. The first few steps into the cloakroom of the school were not promising. The place smelled musty, like old socks. It lacked the cheer of the primary colors of Trixie's. By contrast, Mrs. Morse's school was 1,000 shades of brown. Brown doors, brown floors, brown ceilings, and brown furniture. The only things that weren't brown were the stone walls and the brown things that had long since turned gray. There was nobody to greet her as she examined the rows of dark cloaks hanging from hooks. Drusilla deposited her coat and hat, then swallowed hard before opening the door to the main body of the school. The room was lit with a bizarre combination of gas lamps and torches that threw dueling shadows. It revealed a grand hall that rose several stories. At the far end, a giant clock made of dozens of glistening gears chugged and whirled away. At the top of the clock, which must have been 30 feet tall, sat a giant bronze bell that tolled the hour, 8 o'clock. At least you're on time, but I don't understand why they're allowing a new girl to start 2 weeks into the school year, a tall, bespectacled girl said from across the hall. She approached with determined strides and wore a fading purple dress robe over a brown pinafore. Her name tag read Margaret Finn. In her hands she held a notebook and made big checks with a pen as Drusilla answered her question. Name? Asked Margaret. Drusilla Gobblestone. Big check. State of birth? Asked Margaret. Maine, replied Drusilla. Margaret narrowed her eyes behind lenses so thick the pupils were magnified threefold. She wore a fierce expression reminiscent of other girls Drusilla knew at the orphanage. Serious girls who pulled their hair back from their faces in tight buns that tugged at their skin. Margaret, however, did not have her hair in a bun. Instead, she had 2 floppy ponytails tied with loopy bits of red yarn. The ponytails made her appear garish and clownish, like someone desperately trying to look half their age. By the size of her, she had to be at least 18. Mother's name? Asked Margaret. Unknown, replied Drusilla. Margaret stopped making checks in her notebook. How can you be admitted if we don't know who your mother is? Asked Margaret. Drusilla produced Mrs. Morse's invitation from her pocket. It was a fine brown affair with brown engravings on a lighter brown background. It was printed on paper so stiff it could serve as a backstop for a hockey puck. Right, well, irregular, said Margaret. Irregular to have a new girl start today, and irregular to have a girl without a family. Family is how everyone gets into our school. Margaret leaned forward. I'll be the first to tell you that orphans don't belong here, but let's continue. I suppose you don't have a name for your father either. Gustav Gobblestone, replied Drusilla. Wait, you don't know your mother, but you know your father? Asked Margaret. I most certainly do. He died under mysterious circumstances on the 17th day of the 12th month of the year I was born, or so I've been told, replied Drusilla. Margaret looked shocked, but soon recovered and made a sweeping check on her paper. Then she stuck out a bony finger and poked Drusilla below the rib cage. You're short and decidedly unfit. You'll have a year to get ready for the cataloging course, and you'll need to be in tip-top shape for that. For now, I'll mark flabby, shall I? Once more, Margaret made a check. Definitely not flabby. Drusilla was indignant. That's all the questions I have, Margaret snapped her notebook shut. You must go to Nurse Mooney, who will delouse you. We can't have orphans with lice invading our school. No, don't protest. Just close your mouth and follow me. Drusilla followed the girl down a dark corridor to the nurse's office. With each step, she thought over the life events that led her to the front door of Mrs. Morse's. It was true that she had always felt different than the other orphans at Trixie's. She shunned play and felt more at home in the books she found in the orphanage's library. By the age of 10, she had taught herself a fair amount of Latin, Italian, French, and a rustic Himalayan dialect which used long strokes for an alphabet. It was known as Tepodin. This ancient Himalayan dialect helped in her correspondence to a peasant boy who lived at the foot of Mount Everest. Among other things, she intended to grow up and marry her Himalayan peasant pen pal and retire in the shady slopes outside of Kathmandu. Life had thrown her a curveball a week ago when Madame Trixie came toddling down the hall holding an invitation to Mrs. Morse's. I do not believe that Nepal is for you, my dear. Rather, I think your place is at Mrs. Morse's illustrious school, although what it is that they do there is beyond me. A bit of magic and witchcraft, I suppose. And you get to wear a lovely brown cloak. It was all Madame Trixie could do not to show her distaste when uttering the word brown. While Trixie's occupied an unusually sunny corner in Blessings Hollow, Mrs. Morse's school for wayward girls and other exotic creatures was halfway up the side of a cliff that overlooked the Atlantic. It took 300 death-defying steps to reach the front door of the Victorian stone castle, which was comprised of multiple wings, numerous towers, and a sprinkling of turrets. What happened on the other side of the door nobody could say, for the girls who attended Mrs. Morse's were seldom seen out and about. They were known to be reclusive and elitist. Even if one of them were to be caught out and about in Blessings Hollow, they would never divulge any information about the place, only repeating the school motto. Mrs. Morse's home for wayward girls and other exotic creatures is very reclusive and very elite, only fine quality sorts admitted, references checked, pedigrees preferred. The school name was a bit of a misnomer, the nurse explained, as Drusilla sat on crinkly paper that covered a stainless steel examining table. The woman had the eyes of a cow, large and watery. On top of her head she wore a frilly lace nurse's cap, which perched like a fascinator. While the nurse talked, Drusilla examined the strange anatomical drawings on the office walls. Drawn on a vellum, they looked medieval. A few of the drawings were of animals. There was a strange one of a snake that appeared larger width-wise than an anaconda. Below it was printed the words, "Fire Snake." There was another one of some sort of camel creature with 5 humps. This one was titled 5-Humped Creature. The rest were of the human body. There were drawings of feet, lungs, nostrils, hearts, and livers. One drawing was especially gruesome, as it showed a person, possibly a doctor or barber, sawing off another patient's leg with a hacksaw. The patient smiled in delight. Long ago, we used to take in the occasional wayward girl, Mooney chit-chatted. That's how the school was started. But we are done with that. It's by invitation these days, and only to girls of fine families. Tell me about yours. What do your parents do for a living? It seemed rude to blurt out, they don't do anything for a living because they're dead. So Drusilla considered her options as the nurse plunged a tongue depressor into her mouth. My father died not long after he deposited me on the doorsteps of Trixie's with a note. I don't know what was written on the note because it was burned accidentally during the great paper shortage. I only know my name, Drusilla Gobblestone, and that my father disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The nurse understood only bits of this, as talking with a tongue depressor in one's mouth was not conducive to elocution. Stick out your tongue. Never heard of the great paper shortage, and don't know what Trixie's is. That's it. Little farther. Good. Great then. Tell me who your mother is. Drusilla repeated herself with Well, like I said, I would drop off on the doorstep of Trixie's. Didn't this Trixie's teach you manners, Mooney hissed? Wait for me to extract the tongue depressor. Now, who did you say your mother is? I don't know. Drusilla repeated her life story. Hold on a second. You say you're an orphan? This seemed a sticking point for the inhabitants of Mrs. Morris's. Regardless, Drusilla gave a nod. And when you say you were dropped off on the doorstep of Trixie's, you mean the Tri-State Orphanage? The one run by Madame Beatrix? You're an orphan and you've been admitted to this school? Drusilla waved her invite around once more. Oh, no, we must speak with the headmistress. I fear there is some mistake. We no longer admit wayward girls. Like I said, it's a misnomer. Although we have exotic creatures high and low, that part of the name is true. We shall have to speak with the headmistress at once. You do not belong here. The fact that Drusilla was born under a dark sign, which was why she was invited to attend Mrs. Morris's school in the first place, may seem strange. Indeed, the two things may seem non sequitur to the uneducated observer. But Mrs. Morris's had long been a school for witchcraft, and a good way to identify a witch was that they were often born on an odd day of an even-numbered month when Earth was aligned with one of several heavenly bodies known as sortilege stars. Any good headmistress of a witch-seeking school knew this to be true. This was known as being born under a dark sign. Incidentally, the other good way of finding quality witches was to seek out children from only the best sort of witching families. But Mrs. Morris's school had long since exhausted the second option for finding pupils. Headmistress Ellen Tattinger, who went by the nickname Tatty, knew a lot about seeking out witchy children. She knew that having a school comprised solely of students from fine witching stock meant that it was shrinking in population. There were only so many daughters of fine families to go around. Not to mention that international school competition was killing Tatty's enrollment numbers. Still, many members of the board opposed allowing orphans to return through their doors. It was enough to make Tatty wring her hands every time someone asked how she was going to fix the plumbing To her credit, she had a plan, a very good plan, and she had been preparing to present it to the parents at a parent presentation immediately. That was before Sarah Hopkins disappeared. It was before Cara Byrne was snatched from her bed, and it was before Annabelle Merriweather went missing after a rough game of rugby. This last event, the disappearance of Annabelle, had been accompanied by a most disturbing phone call, a call that Daddy was trying hard to forget. The fact that 3 students disappeared in the first 2 months of her tenure was not lost on the headmistress. She had retreated with her parent presentation plan poster boards to her office, where she locked them away in a metal safe. She couldn't meet with board members. What if someone asked questions? For now, she had simply told everyone, teachers and parents included, that the girls had been invited unexpectedly to go abroad to school. No, her plan would not see the light of day until she brought the girls home safely or was fired. She reckoned the latter might happen sooner than the former, as she had no clues to the girls' whereabouts. I see you are nodding off a bit. We can continue the story another day. Yes, the story is a little bit dark, and I don't want to disturb you as you're trying to fall asleep. I'm just going to head up top now and steer us into the universe. Not to worry, I have an invisible protective force field designed by Daisy Jane and Katie. Oh, I can't remember her last name. Starts with an L. They are 2 very good scientists from Earth. Anyway, I'll steer the airship over to the next planet, which is Carmen, alright? And we'll look for a doctor there. Yes, I love my airship. I always wanted to be a star girl.